Hi, I'm Ben Greiner, Director of Apple Technology at Ntiva. And with me today is Ross Matsuda, Systems Engineer focused on the Apple platform. And Ross, welcome back. Let me share my screen. I know you missed last month due to the big COVID.
Yeah, sorry
you
about
recovered, you
that.
survived.
Somehow.
So I'm glad you're back. We have a lot to cover today, so I want to jump right into it. Our topic is going to be Mac authentication with Microsoft and Google. Technically, there's a third piece to that as well we'll get to. But first, some news. Our last event, which I know, Ross, you missed, our last webinar, but right after that was the Apple event. And so I just wanted to touch on the items that Apple did mention. We're not going to go into too much detail. In fact, a lot of this doesn't really have anything to do with business per se. They're new phones, new, faster, better, brighter, all the good things, iPhone 14. There's Apple Watch Series 8, and there was Apple Watch Ultra. And Ultra is pretty cool. It's very sturdy, longer battery life, meant for the outdoors or anyone who thinks they need a watch that can survive the outdoors. I know lots of people have already gotten this who I'm sure rarely leave their house, but it's a cool watch. And then the AirPod Pro, they updated the AirPod Pros, which just started shipping, I think, last week. And I have some AirPod Pros. I love them. I was going to do a quick plug for them because if you haven't tried them out, I would definitely recommend it. I use them every day in the web meetings like this, and then occasionally listening to music or at the gym or on a walk. And they have this cool little thing, which I have not taken advantage of, but you can customize your case with your, what they call it, Memoji or Animoji, or list of selected icons. You can't, I don't believe you can do totally custom, like you can't give them a logo, at least not on a personal level, maybe on a corporate level. Excuse me. And there is this one cool thing I've been reading about where if you do customize your case and you view the status of your AirPods on your phone, you will see your customization on your phone, which I think is really interesting because that's Apple's hardware and software working together to identify something that's completely unique. And I don't know exactly how they do that. Ross, I don't know if you know, have any insight, or if you've heard of this.
I'm uncertain, but I'm sure that pretty much any of these Memoji or other icons can probably be broken down into just an alphanumeric string that gets called to reference something.
But it's still pretty cool. It's a one-off that you built, given to Apple. They printed it, and now it's part of your iPhone software, so to speak. So I think that's pretty cool. Something I want to mention, because a client reminded me of this, is Adobe will disable support for authoring Type 1 PostScript fonts in January. So that is coming up. And the reason I forgot about it is because I wrote this article, and Ross, I don't know if you can see this, but I did a screen grab of it today. I wrote this article still using PostScript Type 1 fonts. Really? I did that 12 years ago. 12 years ago, I wrote an article that said, if you're still using PostScript Type 1 fonts, you're behind. And here, and Adobe was promising, a lot of companies were promising end of life for PostScript Type 1 fonts at that time. So over 10 years ago, a dozen years ago. And it's not until January of this coming year that's actually going to happen. It is really going to happen. And in fact, let me open up this link. This is the actual article. I didn't have my web browser open. Okay, here's the actual article. It's a very popular article, so we moved it to the Ntiva domain. We didn't move all hundreds of our articles because it was too time consuming, but this is one that gets a lot of hits, so we moved it. And I think there's a note here. I haven't updated this in a while. It says 2018, last time I touched it, but Microsoft stopped supporting Type 1 fonts in Office 2013. And yeah, upgrading to OpenType is really the solution. So for anyone who's still hanging on to their PostScript fonts, you really do need to get new ones. Like, they are going to stop working. And Extensis also has an article. Let me see. Here we go. My links are taking me a bit to get to, but there's an article from Extensis on how to prepare. And even though I have an icon of ThoughtBook here, we do recommend that you use a professional level font management tool from Extensis. And they now have one that's cloud-based, so it's even easier. Connect Fonts is what they call it. And it's easier than UTS, Universal Type Server, to set up and get started with. So if you have any questions about that, let us know. And thank you to the client who reminded me of that. Okay, let's get to the next slide here. Okay, security. Last time we mentioned that we were making some changes to VisionBot, and we made those changes. And I sent an email out to everyone who has an account at VisionBot. And just to reiterate, what we did was just change from making no judgment on File Vault to making a judgment. And our judgment is if your machines are, what did we say, Ross? 3 or 4 years? I think 4 years. If they're within 4 years old, if they're running 1015 or newer, and they're a notebook, they really should be file vaulted. And if it meets those criteria, then when you log into File Vault, you will see in the sidebar, you'll see a security tab that will list all of the machines affected. If you have any questions, click the question mark and there's details and a link to prepare your team for File Vault encryption. When you go to the device page, you will see a new button up here that talks about File Vault. And in the detail page, you will see a little yellow instead of a gray. It used to be gray, it says not encrypted. And in the report, not encrypted is now yellow instead of gray. So all the stuff, these two items have been here just without the color. We added the color. This is an addition and this is an addition. And what we're hoping is this will better help clients identify those machines that need to be file vaulted. Contact us. That's the prepare your team for File Vault encryption. Contact us. Tell your team what to expect. We will send out an MDM command. They will get a pop-up to File Vault. And there's lots more detail in that I can answer questions around if you reach out to me. But the goal is we've been pushing File Vault. Clients, I think, haven't really been hearing us. So we want to be a little more aggressive. We want them to see it. We want them to hear us. And we want everyone to work together to get these machines file vaulted, which means encrypted. Okay. Anything to add on that, Ross?
No, that's the goodness. Just a reminder here that by changing the way that VisionBot's reporting and presenting you information, remember, nothing has changed on the computer. Your computer is not intrinsically somehow less secure than it was 3 weeks ago.
Right.
We're just doing our best to let people know, like, all right, let's do this thing. If it's a workstation that will not have its performance affected in any sort of meaningful way through device encryption, then let's do it. And that's really going to be these SSD-based Macs, where you don't have to worry about, bit by bit encryption on a spinning disk drive on an iMac from 2013.
Yeah.
So yeah, reach out. Let's get this thing done. We've done everything in our power to make the automation for this, quick and intuitive and painless, so that we can help you secure your fleets more quickly and just have one less thing to worry about.
Yeah, for sure. And here's that article, Prepare Your Team for File Vault. And we have an email template that we recommend you use. Of course, you can edit it just to give your team a heads up so that when they do see those pop-ups, they're expecting them and they don't ignore them. They don't think it's something that, oh, that's not for me. Okay. macOS Ventura. I just want to comment that it's coming maybe the end of this month, Ross, but possibly next month. Apple hasn't said.
We still don't have a release date. I would be surprised if it didn't launch in October, but it's up to them, and as they wrap up the beta cycle, when it's when we're going to get that finalized date, but sometime soon. That's what we're expecting it.
And in preparation for that, a couple things. We will, as always, block the upgrade, block the ability for anyone to apply the upgrade. And the reason we do that is that there used to be a natural block when Apple charged money for the operating system. People didn't just go out on day one and buy it and start installing it. Very, very, very few people. But as soon as they made the operating system free, and they surprised us with that 1 year, and suddenly we had a bunch of clients downloading and installing the free upgrade and literally breaking their applications. Like Adobe wasn't working, workflows weren't working, things, it was chaotic and a nightmare. So to protect everyone, we do block the ability to upgrade. However, if you have a spare machine that you want to test with, let us know so we can make sure that we allow that to be installed on that machine. And something new for this year, Apple is only allowing us to block the upgrade for 90 days. So after 90 days, there's nothing IT can do other than asking, which is always a challenge. There's nothing IT can do to stop someone from applying a free upgrade to their computer. So our goal is to get everyone ready, all of our clients ready for this upgrade within 90 days. And 90 days from the release date, which we don't know yet. And in preparation for that, I really want to encourage everyone to update their Mac. If you're not already on Big Sur, I get the names confused sometimes, Ross. Big Sur.
Monterey is the
okay,
current
yeah.
build.
Okay, I felt that wasn't right. I'm like, why is Big Sur in my head? But it doesn't feel right. Monterey is the latest. Let me go to my machine here about this Mac. 12.6 Monterey is the very latest, and that's what we want to see everyone on. If you're not on that, that will show up in VisionBot. You will see that in VisionBot. You can see your team, whether they're on it or not. And if they're not, we want to encourage them to get on it. And the biggest challenge is there is a bug in the update process. Let me get to our article. And I want to encourage people, because technically when that upgrade comes out, Ross, and it is made available, it is technically possible for someone to not be up to date and run the upgrade. We know that.
Yes, correct.
But in my experience, and maybe I'm just being too detail oriented about this, I feel safer patching my machine completely up to date to the very latest before I take the leap into the upgrade. And I think in our experience of doing this for years and years and years, you have a much better chance of nothing going wrong if your machine is completely up to date before you upgrade. Don't skip an upgrade. Don't think you can skip any patches before you upgrade. Get it as far along as you can before you go to the next level. And that's why we encourage clients to do this. And that's why we have this nudge notification, which occasionally clients get confused and they say, turn nudge off. It's annoying me. Well, guess what? If it's annoying you, it means your Mac is not secure, not up to date. There's something wrong and it needs to be fixed. And unfortunately, there's an Apple bug. So if I scroll down here, we have a section called trouble applying updates with a question mark. And we have some solutions, and Ross built a custom solution called Kickstart Process to fix this. And in some cases, we've had to even go deeper with the install Monterey 12. And this says 12.5.1. Is it 12.6 now, Ross?
Yeah, the 12.6 installer is now available in Mac Manage.
Older screen grab. The point of all of this is we're here to help your team get up to date, but they have to take it seriously, and we need our primary contacts to use VisionBot to see who's not up to date and help them get there. It's a team effort. Anything I missed there, Ross?
No, I think that's the most of it. If your office as a whole, if your organization isn't running macOS Monterey yet, macOS 12, if you're on Big Sur, macOS 11 or earlier, 10.15, 10.14, hopefully not, please reach out to us. Like we very much want to get as many people as we can on a fully updated, a fully patched version of Monterey as possible when we hit that 90-day mark and Ventura is sort of released to the world, once we can no longer defer it, once we can no longer block it. If you have business reasons, if there's specific software that you cannot run in Monterey or that you still work with us, we can verify all of that. Generally speaking, developers tend to support the newest version of macOS and 2 versions prior. And so right now, they're supporting macOS 12 Monterey and then also Big Sur and Catalina, the 2 preceding versions. Once Ventura launches, we're expecting a full drop of support from macOS 10.15 Catalina. And so any machines that you have at your organization running macOS 10.15, those are no longer going to be receiving critical security updates from Apple in the future, and a lot of other software developers, Microsoft included, are no longer going to be supporting it. And so it's essential that we sort of catch everyone up as fluidly as we can in preparation for the changes that are coming with Ventura.
And it is expected, and this is why another reason why we block Ventura for as long as we can for 90 days, that there will be some software that does not work or needs to be patched or has some bugs. And even though those developers, just like we have access to the betas, they should be testing with the betas. You know, Apple does occasionally surprise them at the 11th hour with a last minute change and they have to scramble. So that's a reason why we wait. But Ross, is it too aggressive of me to say that if you are running software today that is not Monterey compatible, then you might reconsider the software you're using? Like,
yeah, and that's been Apple's stance on it too, which is, you know, if the software vendors you're using are not adopting, you know, these changes and new features and new offerings that are built into Apple's platform, maybe it's time to change vendors.
yeah, I mean, we're a year, we're a year into it now. So if a printer or a print driver or a software developer is not yet supporting Monterey, that's a huge red flag for me.
Yes, no, I absolutely agreed.
Okay, let's move on. Finish the news here. This is completely random, but it's something that came up on my radar recently. I want to throw it out there. I'd love anyone's feedback. If anyone is using Air.Inc. as a solution, we work with a lot of creatives, and trying to get the creatives to the cloud has been, although easier, historically it's been a challenge. And I look at this in three ways. There's your standard office worker. They've been in the cloud for years. There's your standard creative professional doing video, print, online work, or sorry, not video, print work, online work, creative work in the Adobe Creative Cloud. I feel pretty confident about moving them to the cloud. And then the last, holdout for really moving to the cloud are the video editors and the heavy use of Premiere, Adobe Premiere, maybe Final Cut Pro. And Air is advertising that they can handle that, and they're really appealing to the creative market. So I like what they're saying. I love everything about it. I just don't have any experience with it yet. So I'm curious to know if anyone out there is using it or has tried it. We'll continue to investigate it. Okay, let's get into Mac authentication with Microsoft and Google. Wow, we only have 10 minutes left, Ross. My apologies for taking up so much time with the news. So Addigy, what we're talking about here is Addigy Identity. And Addigy Identity is a tool that we use that allows a computer out of the box or existing to be converted so that when your team logs into their Macs, they use the same email and password and two-factor that they use for their email. And if your email is hosted at Google, that would be your login for your Mac. If it's hosted at 365, which is technically Azure AD. So Azure AD, Office 365, I'm not going to get into the details of the differences. Just know if you have email hosted at Microsoft, not on-premise, I hope no one's still running an on-premise email exchange server. That's today you should be in the cloud. If you're in the cloud, then we can connect your Macs and your users can use those same authentication credentials. Now there is a a third option. I'm grouping Azure and 365 into one, but this is how it's presented on Addigy's website. There's a third option, which is Okta. Okta is not an email provider. It is a third-party identity provider layered on top of typically Google or Office infrastructure. And in fact, there's probably a whole nother discussion, Ross, we could have about why anyone would want to use something like Okta when they have Google or Microsoft. We'll table that and just say that if you're using any of these solutions, I strongly encourage you to talk with us so that we can simplify the ability for your team to unbox a Mac and use the credentials that they use for email and convert your existing fleet into, instead of having a separate login for their Mac, have the ability to log in with their email credentials. And as Addigy says on their website, and let me go to their website here. Zero touch deployment allows users, so zero touch is the deployment method that we're trying to get all of our clients into, and we have our clients using that. This is an additional layer upon zero touch that makes it even easier, but it allows users to log into their macOS devices with familiar and secure identity provider credentials and multi-factor authentication. So Ross, should we try a demo? And I say that hesitantly because I asked Ross about this morning, literally this morning. Could we do a demo of this? And Ross, of course, said, well, we can try. We have a VM because I can't show you on a real machine because I can't share my screen as it's booting up. So we have to do it in a VM, or I have to have a camera pointed at a machine, which I did not set up. So Ross, if you think you're ready, we could try to do a demo and show people.
Sure, we can give this a shot. Can you go ahead and halt your screen share? I'll go ahead and click on mine. All right, and let's see. Okay, you with me?
Yep.
Great. So
looks like you're using an old school square screen.
Oh, you betcha. So this is, in this virtual machine, this is File Vault encrypted. And so this is what you would see if you were setting up identity, on a computer already in production. As soon as you power it on, before you do anything else, you need to decrypt the computer from File Vault. So we're just going to toss in our password here. That decrypts the machine and starts loading the operating system. Now, once you have Addigy Identity enabled, this is going to go through all those original steps. But before you hit the desktop, before it actually loads your user account, it's going to take us to a different screen. And so the way that we currently have this set up for this demo, we're going to be using Azure. And so we should see an Azure or Office 365 login screen coming up here shortly.
And let's see, while that's loading, of course it's loading as soon as I start talking.
Well, thank you for talking, otherwise it would have taken longer.
Yeah.
All right, so here we go. We're going to end up just at this very boring old Azure screen.
Yeah, this is the Microsoft account. And Ross, before we go into this, I wanted to point out, this is pretty straightforward. And if anyone uses Microsoft Office, this window is probably familiar to you. Anytime you have to authenticate in Office 365 apps or online after a security update or after a fresh install, or periodically if whether it's required by your internal IT team to change something, change your passcode, which we don't recommend. Or there are reasons for security that you will occasionally get prompted. This is the window that you see. And so we're seeing this, at the Mac login screen. But I did want to point out, since we're here, that it is possible for troubleshooting reasons, and occasionally there are troubleshooting steps that must be involved here. You can revert to the Mac login screen. And so do you want to show them the options?
Sure. It's these buttons up here in the top right corner. The first one will give you a list of local user accounts, and this is just to bypass identity, but still use this interface to log into a local account. The second one is to reload. That just reloads this web view, because that's all this is. This is just loading that Azure Login Web View or a Google Login Web View. Then this third item here, these three dots, is what brings up our additional options. So if you're having any trouble getting online, you can choose a different Wi-Fi network. And then you've got this option to revert to macOS login window. This just takes you back to the native experience your users are familiar with. If for some reason you're unable to go through this workflow, more than troubleshooting, this can often be a real lifesaver. If you're in a situation where you don't have internet access, and you still need to reboot your machine for whatever reason. And if you can't get online to communicate with your identity provider, you do still need a way into the machine, which is why we leave that option available to you.
Yeah, for example, if you're on a flight and you don't have internet access, or a lot of flights have terrible internet access, so there's no guarantee they're going to work to communicate with the server, and you can't log in, you could revert to the macOS login and bypass this. Now, for those teams that are super security conscious and they don't want to allow that, there is the option to not allow that. But that does mean when you're in that situation I just described, you will not be able to get into your computer.
Correct.
So, and then it looks like you can power it down as well.
Oh yeah. Just if you're done here for whatever reason, it'll let you shut down or restart.
The sun's hitting me right in the face. I'm gonna close this. And what is the sign-in options? Is that another way to get into where we were?
This is Azure specific, and so if you have additional authentication connections, you can kick those open as well.
Okay.
For the moment, though, we're just going to use a pretty vanilla email address here. I'll just give my password in here.
And in the forgot my password link, that would take you to Office to reset your password.
Correct. Something to remember about this is that we call it Addigy Identity. That's the name of sort of the feature set as a whole. But at the end of the day, this is really just a web view to your existing identity provider. So anything you do with management of that email address and password, that all gets handled by them. This is just like a little tiny web browser to get you there.
Mm-hmm.
So I have just successfully signed in. And this is the first time I've signed in with this email address on this virtual machine. And so it says, great, what do you want to do? We can either connect you to an existing user account on the Mac. So if for example, you're deploying Addigy Identity fresh at your organization and you've got dozens or hundreds of Macs already out in the wild, you can actually link your email address to an existing account, type in the password, and hook those together. That makes sure that in the future, whenever you log in with your email credentials, it'll take you right to your existing user account and keep that password synced up with the password you've set with your identity provider. The other option here.
And Ross, when you say password, you mean the password for that existing account, which may be different than your 365 passcode.
Correct. So the password that you use with Microsoft or Google will overwrite the existing password you have previously used to log into the computer. Mm-hmm. The other option here is if you're a new user on a computer, you can create a brand new user account and then sign in with that and sort of keep it separated from any existing accounts in the machine. So you can go either way, it just depends on what your situation is. For the moment, I'm going to go ahead and try to hook this up to my existing account. So I'm going to type in my local password, and we're going to get this thing set up.
And it's only the first time on an existing machine that you'll see that pop up. If this were a brand new machine, there would be no accounts, and it would create the account that you just logged in using 365. What was the other thing I wanted to mention about that as you're logging in? I lost it. Yeah. Okay, so we've logged in.
We're logged in. We're here. And now I'm logged in with this standard user account. The name of the account has changed to match my Azure account, which is great. And the password has now been updated to my Azure password as well. In the future, if I change my password using Microsoft, then the next time I log into the computer with that updated password, Addigy Identity will also update the local password, always keeping those in sync. But do remember, you do need to log out and log back in so the Mac can see that the password has changed, and get that updated for you.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people they think, oh, well, I changed my passcode online, so my Mac must know it. But the Mac is only going to know it at login. Is that right? Log in or log out or restart. Like,
Correct.
it has to have a trigger to actually go see it and change it. And behind the scenes, not only is it changing and updating the password, but it's making changes to keychain, which if anyone has changed a passcode without Addigy Identity or changed a passcode in any way other than in the Finder, they may have experienced tremendous keychain pain, meaning keychain was not in alignment. The password did not change for keychain. So they had a login password and a keychain password, and that would often give people fits. And Addigy's done a great job with Addigy Identity of aligning keychain updates.
I saw that we got a question in chat here as well.
Oh.
How can new hires log in if their Google account hasn't been activated yet? And the answer is they can't.
Yeah, good answer.
And so
good
in a situation like that, once you have identity live for an organization, the hope is that your onboarding process for new employees involves, human resources, involves internal IT, creating that user in your identity provider before they receive their machine so that they have credentials to log in with. If you're in a, it's strange to say, if you're in a workflow where you would be handing a new employee a computer before they have an email address or are known by HR, I would recommend reviewing that onboarding process.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad it was brought up. Because yes, in all cases, whether it's Okta, Microsoft, or Google, of course, the account has to be created. And in some cases, you have to log into the account. Maybe it's on a phone as they get the invite to create their account, but they have to log in, activate it, sometimes create their passcode, get all the account stuff solid before this is going to work. Right.
And the follow-up question there was also, does Addigy Identity replace Apple Business accounts? And that is a negative. That is a negative. Your Apple Business Manager is very, very important. It's an integral part of Apple device management. And that has the ability to interface with your identity providers with something called federation. That's a whole other webinar. But for Addigy Identity, the main goal here, it's just about how your users log into their Macs and use those computers. It's just a link between the device and your existing identity provider. Apple Business is thankfully untouched by the whole process.
It could play a role in future Apple SSO integrations, and I'll talk about that in just briefly. But today, Apple Business does not play a role. And even though you can, as Ross said, you can federate your Apple Business account, so it uses the same credentials. It is totally separate and independent of Addigy Identity. So I would table the business accounts for now, focus on Addigy Identity, focus on getting first your new machines, or you could start with your existing machines, but obviously start with 1, 2, test, make sure it's working, and then roll it out to the team with some communication. So thanks for the questions. Love it. Here's a screenshot just in case the live demo went completely sour. And we do have, let me see, where's my, we do have a couple articles, and I'll go to one right now. We have one for Google, we have one for Microsoft. We don't have one for Okta. We'll probably build one when required. We haven't had to. And they're pretty much identical and showing you what Ross walked us through. There's a screenshot of the 2-factor. And then
remember, you're gonna have to share your screen if you have those visible right now.
Thank you, Ross.
Absolutely. And thank you, attendees, for sticking with us. I know we're running a little bit over.
Yes, we'll wrap this up soon. Okay, you see my screen here?
Yes, indeed.
The one that I, was talking about, but no one could see. There's the screen grab. We'll come back to that, and this slide in just a minute. Okay, So here we are. This is the public K-base article. If you just search in support.ntiva.com is the URL. If you search for Addigy Identity, we have two of them, one for Microsoft and one for Google. And we just have some screenshots, what to expect. And first time only, this is what Ross talked about, how you can choose an existing account or create new. And I think that's it. We may have, I think we might have had some troubleshooting steps in here as well if anything goes wrong. If anything does go wrong, we want to hear from you because anytime you layer on a tool that relies on multiple solutions, we're talking about Apple, we're talking about Microsoft or Google, we're talking about Addigy, those all three have to work in combination. And if any one of those pieces changes, we have seen issues. They are always fixable, but we need to know about them. So yeah, here's the Google login experience, which we didn't demo, but it's basically you just get the Google prompt instead of Addigy or instead of Microsoft. Okay, the last thing I want to, well, two things I want to mention for those of you who can stick with us. These are the options for Addigy Identity. You can block setup assistant while service is getting configured. Ross, what does that mean?
That's specifically in reference to new out-of-the-box devices. So if you have automated device enrollment setup, that zero touch that Ben was mentioning earlier, that in conjunction with Addigy Identity would allow your user to unbox their machine, power it on, get it online. And then as soon as their computer connects to the internet, it'll say, oh, I see I'm owned by this organization. Click continue to proceed. And then after a couple more prompts, it should prevent the user from trying to set up their own local user account and instead just take them straight to that web-based login. So like, okay, we know you're here, you sign on with Google or you sign on with Microsoft and just load that screen instead.
Sorry, I got ahead of myself. Okay, and the next one, create users as administrators. Because we support zero touch automated device enrollment, we do allow and encourage people to run as admins. It's what is unofficially known as a managed admin because it's an admin on a machine that is being managed. So I'm okay with it, but if your security team is not, then those users can be created as standard users. Correct, Ross?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Allow local account credentials at the Addigy Identity login window. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, this and the last item, so this checkbox and the final one, are both in reference to those tools where you can bypass Addigy Identity in order to just type in an account password or to revert to the previous, the standard macOS login experience. So these are the fail-safes that are included to ensure that you can still use your computer even if you're offline. We usually leave them both on because it tends to be either an organization wants to allow that backup or they explicitly don't. Just turn it all on.
And then, so that's this one, and it's allow users to leave Addigy Identity and revert to macOS login. And then the one we skipped over, allow users to sync Addigy Identity accounts with local device user accounts. I don't know why you would ever uncheck that unless you really did just want to force everyone to create no accounts, but I'm not sure why you would do that.
Yeah, the only use case I can think for that is if you're in like a computer lab kind of setup where you might have a local administrator and you want to make sure that no student or other employee sort of tries to take over that account. As rare as an edge case that would be.
Yeah, that's a good example, a computer lab. And then you have a couple options, and I think as long as the client sends us the files, we can drop these in place. But you can choose a background image. There's a minimum and maximum size, and then you can choose a logo. And if you're doing this or you want to do this, let us know. We'll send you the specs. You send us the logo, we'll drop it in. Your team will see your fancy background and logo when they log in.
By default, we're using one of the macOS Ventura background pictures.
This one here.
What I've got set up for most of our clients right now.
And then there is this article, which I found interesting. Let me get the URL up. I don't know why I can't just click the URL, but this is how Apple is improving single sign-on. And the reason I mention this is because Addigy Identity is taking advantage of something that Apple released at WWDC. And how many W's did I say, Ross?
It was an
Anyway.
adequate number of W's.
Okay, thank you. In 2019. And here we are in 2022, and Apple's putting out even more changes and updates coming with Ventura, and even with iOS 16, I think there were some changes there. And some of those changes do require the Apple Business Manager accounts, which was asked about earlier. We're not required on the macOS, more about iOS today, but maybe in the future it could require macOS. So all of this is really getting teams prepared, what we can do today and what we can do tomorrow. And we don't always know because Apple's not always completely transparent about what we can do tomorrow, but they are making changes to what they call platform SSO support for Mac. Means with the latest operating system coming out in the fall, with the updates to Addigy Identity, the idea is when you log into your Mac, you'll authenticate to more things that are authorized with those credentials. And that's a true SSO experience, like single sign-on to get to everything. Your users won't really feel or notice the difference as much as it'll just be a smoother experience for them. So we hope to manage that, probably more realistically next year rather than this year. And this, I love this last piece I want to leave everyone with, the passwords, Apple's trying to build the password, but we still need to have a password to get into or to initiate a system or to trigger what happens next. And as it says here, use a strong one. So we may get our passwords down eventually to a number of passwords, but that one password has got to be secure. Think passphrase, think sentence, something that's unique. That's what I do. I use one password to that, but just a little mention about that. Okay, our next talk will be on Ventura, and hopefully it will be released by then. If not, we'll be talking about the imminent release and everything that we know. Okay, thanks everyone. Have a good rest of your week. Bye.
Cheers. Take care.